Welcome to the Travel Business Unpacked, where passion meets possibility. Here's your host, Meredith Calloway.
Hello, and welcome to the Travel Business Unpacked podcast. Today's episode is another exciting episode because my guest has a lot of things to bring to the table. Anna Harrison of Travel Observation. She is obviously a travel advisor. She is a top producer club member, which means she has arrived and even risen from what we call phase 4 of the travel business. She is a mentor in our Travel Business University program, and she is a mom, a young mom and she gave birth to a child while she was building her travel business. So there is a lot to dig into here, Anna. So welcome to the podcast today.
Thanks for having me, Meredith. I'm excited to talk to you one-on-one. I think it'll be fun.
Yes. What I love, you are a wealth of information. Mm-hmm. And as some of you know who are listening, we have a very engaged community at Gifted Travel Network. We love to connect. We love to share information. We love to collaborate. And we have moved that platform from Facebook to our own custom home now. We were renting a house or renting an apartment on Facebook, and now we built and designed our own home on Circle. So, but when someone posts a question, you can be sure if Anna has an answer, she will be responding very, very quickly. She is just such a wealth of information. So that is one thing that I love about you, and you're just so giving. You're wicked smart. I don't know if you know that, but it's like every time you speak, I'm just like, wow, she knows so much about so many things. So Anna, let's begin with your background. Mm-hmm. I believe you have a teaching background. But yeah, what was your life like before you became a travel advisor? And then how did you transition?
It actually all ties into what you said about wanting to engage people and wanting to help them. And I've always wanted to bring this up, but I think that throughout my life, and I'll share my career, I've always put myself in uncomfortable situations, even if I'm nervous. And everyone in my family knows if I say, oh, I think I'm doing this, I think I'm moving to Africa, I think I'm moving to Florida, it means like I actually have a plane ticket, but I just am still saying I'm thinking about it. So I've always put myself in uncomfortable situations. And because I know what that feels like, that's always driven me to want to pay it forward, to be the person if someone else doesn't understand or is uncomfortable, because I know what it's like, especially as an introvert, to be in an uncomfortable situation and to find that person that reaches out and makes you feel a little bit more comfortable, or who understands the question that you're not trying to ask. A lot of those uncomfortable situations come from my background. I don't have any formal teaching background, but I've always been in some type of education and coaching. I've always had international careers. I'm very lucky. If I wasn't doing this job, I would still be an international career. I could not imagine my life without a global connection. So I'm very lucky in that way. I have a degree in international relations with a minor in French. I studied abroad twice, one of which was international service learning. So I taught English in a school in France, as well as I worked a Pharmacists Without Borders. After university, I spent a year in AmeriCorps in inner city Philadelphia, working on civic engagement and school issues, shall we say. And, I think that ties back to a lot of my story, where a lot of people sort of said, oh, I just assumed that you would go straight into the Peace Corps afterwards. Why are you hanging out in the United States? And I said, no, I want to give back because, my father did pass away when I was 12. And so we lived off of that Social Security till I was 18. And I've always felt it important to kind of repay that debt and repay that forward. And so my sister and I got to do AmeriCorps together in Philadelphia, which was amazing to do that with her. And then I joined the Peace Corps because at the time I wanted to go into the Foreign Service. My family is very international. My dad was American. he met my mother in Portugal when he was setting up the NATO headquarters there. So none of us were born in the United States. We're all born overseas, even though we're all US citizens. So I was born in Spain and grew up in Portugal until we moved to the States after he had retired. And so I thought I was going to follow in, my grandfather, my great-grandfather were in the Foreign Service. My grandfather was the ambassador and the consul general to many, many countries, including the United States. And so I thought I was going to follow. That's just what I thought I was going to do. And the easiest way to get into that is to have a couple years of international development work. And what's kind of the easiest way to do it with not a lot of experience is the Peace Corps. So I joined the Peace Corps, as many of my DC friends did. And I extended. So I spent almost 3 years in West Side working in girls' education and empowerment issues, living in a village with no electricity and no running water. So I work in luxury travel now, but I've seen it all. And I kind of feel like I've earned my stripes. I've slept on a floor and I've ridden a bush taxi for 12 hours with a goat on my lap. And there's still things that I take from that experience that have shaped how I handle clients, how I deal with difficult situations. Mm-hmm. Always thinking about the multicultural component, right? Going back to that, does this person understand the issue? Because if I assume that this person understands it the way I do, that's why we're going to have a misunderstanding and why I'm going to take offense or why I'm going to get mad at it. We all get mad at emails or situations, right? But if you step back and view it through this multicultural lens of, is it possible we're saying two different things? It helps you reframe it and maybe take a break and don't send that email for 2 hours. So after I worked in that field for 3 years, I came back, and in Florida, still international, I was working at a elite sports boarding academy as a international advisor, mainly dealing with immigration admissions. And then I came back to Pittsburgh, which I loved this job. I was the assistant director of international admissions for a private university. So if you weren't a U.S. citizen and you were an undergraduate, I got to admit you, I got to scholarship you, I got to travel around the world recruiting students. I got to do workshops in Brazil and China and Hong Kong and, go on a workshop for my own benefit in Germany. And I loved that. And then finally after that, I was working with a nonprofit focused on bringing foreign policy to the normal person, right? So bringing in diplomats or, interesting issues to make presentations at libraries and things like that. So I've always had that need to connect people and to also deal with people of different levels, different education levels, different perspectives, different values even. You learn a lot when you have to live in someone else's land and speak their language and not always agree with how, they treat their genders or they treat their children, or, you learn a lot about that situation when you are in these different multicultural trips. Yeah. So I dabbled in the actual travel business for quite some time. I would say as early as 2010, because I was this very lonely returned Peace Corps volunteer that didn't quite have a job yet and was always helping people, right? People would say, oh, do you know where I should go in England? And Google was easier back then. I feel like it's gotten harder to find good information, but 10 or 14 years ago, you could really get some good information pretty quickly. So I would love that. I'd be helping all my friends, and Florida, everyone's taking cruises and stuff. So someone just said, why don't you be a travel agent? And so I Googled it. Thank goodness did not land on any scams, right? I didn't land on GT right away. I was with a bigger host agency, but at least it was a legitimate host agency. Yeah. And for a while, I was just kind of doing friends and family cruises, right? Yeah. And then it snowballs. It starts becoming, you meet the one client that wants something different, or the one client that loves what you did and asks you to do their corporate incentive group. Or I'll never forget, I had clients that I've booked for, 10 years now, that their kids have basically grown up with me traveling. And they were sort of my first foray into customized travel, where they said, hey, we want to take let's take a group tour of Ireland. And I wrote to them, I said, listen, you're trying to bring an 8-year-old, especially since there's several of you. I'd really love to see if we could put together something super customized. And they said, sure. And that was my first taste of, wait, You can customize travel. You can have a private driver. You can do things that the 8-year-old's going to be interested in. And they've booked with me forever since then. And
Oh,
so,
wow.
it kind of grew and grew and grew. But because I've always loved my careers and my jobs, I just still thought of it as, are we allowed to say side hustle?
Yes. Yes, we are allowed.
Right.
And we call that, I mean, the technical term I have is phase 2, that the average travel advisor never makes it past phase 2 out of the 4 phases. And when you're in phase 2, you're not making money. Your revenues typically are around the same as your expenses. So there's zero profit. And that's not even paying yourself a salary.
Right.
And that's a hobby or a side hustle.
Yeah. Well, and I got to the point where it was a decent amount of money, and that was funding my own personal travels, my personal lifestyle. It's great. You're 20 something or whatever it is, essentially with 2 incomes. And then in 2019, I decided I wanted to work for myself. I realized I was basically holding down 2 full-time jobs. My partner also had gone back to school in his 30s, and he was in the Army, and he was a professional athlete. And so he had a crazy schedule. But when he wrapped up that education component, all of a sudden he was free, and he'd never been able to come with me on trips before. And so he was raring to go. And I had just switched jobs where I no longer traveled. So all of a sudden I had to take vacation time. I had to, only during closures. And, there was a situation that I realized that I would be better on my own, because then I can control who my boss is, right?
Yeah.
And so in 2019, I said, I think I can do this. Let me quit my day job. And we wanted to move to Europe for several months, which I can do because I have an EU passport. So I quit my job, went to Alaska for 2 weeks, came back and said, oh, I'm in charge of my money now. And my commissions doubled instantly because the time.
Isn't that amazing? It's so amazing.
Right. It was just, and I waited. I was smart. I tracked my commissions for about a year to see what my average commissions coming in every month were. And that way I knew the minimum. Right.
Right.
Like if nothing.
So when you quit your job, you were actually working for another travel advisor as an employee or a travel agency? No.
Okay. I've never worked for a travel. I was working for a nonprofit focused on legal issues.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. So,
but you were still selling travel on the side is what you were. Okay. Got it. Now you just decided to take the side hustle and turn it into a full-time thing. So I'm curious because you have grown your sales significantly since joining GTN. Has that been strategic? Has that happened by accident? A little bit of both? And if it's been strategic, what was your strategy?
I don't like to say it's by accident because I'm not 100% sure I believe in pure accidents all the way.
Right.
I think that I definitely had a goal. Like the very first time that I sold $1 million, it was a definite goal. And I did put a lot of strategy into how to market. The thing is, COVID was a blessing because I quit my job in 2019. And then all of 2020, I basically didn't have an income. But what that allowed me to do was I started fresh. I didn't have to take on the clients that I was still doing a lot of very small fry, a lot of work with no income, the researching for things that I'm going to book with no commission. And so I was able to take a step back and say, these are the trips that I want to book. So I came up with Facebook ads about planning trips to Portugal and running email campaigns about that. I wrote blogs about Alaska. I became obsessed with luxury train travel and I wrote about that. I figured out how to turn my passion for words and my passion for travel into something that was hopefully going to shine through. I become very focused on what I love. And so that then started to generate the sales. And I always tell people it's not just about the sales number, though. I have had clients that started out with smaller trips that trusted me that then come back to me 2 years later to say, now we want to spend that 25th anniversary trip, with a 4 times larger income than before. And so you have to I wouldn't turn everything down, especially when you're first starting out, but getting a lot of clarity on this is what I waste my time on and I'm not going to do it anymore, versus I love doing this trip in particular, no matter what the sales amount is. I think that was useful. So the first $1 million year was very strategic. I've done that and more ever since then.
Mhm.
After that, I would say it was not as strategic because, I had a little one and I was trying to, and I had to make a decision whether to focus on a sales number that doesn't actually mean anything. In the world outside of travel, people don't know what that number, you're not saying I want a Nobel Peace Prize, right? So I had to kind of make a decision to say, okay, I want to maintain my level. I want to maintain these type of sales and these clients, but I also am not going to drive myself crazy because I have other priorities right now. I need to make myself well. I need to look after my family. And the reason that I left my very last job was I wasn't happy. And I didn't want to get in a situation where the job that I was in charge of, my own business, I didn't want that to be a source of unhappiness. So I backed off the pressure, and I still got the numbers.
Can I ask, because I believe, I don't know if there's a correlation here, but I'm going to guess there is a correlation. Was it after that first year you hit $1 million that you decided to hire help? Or had you already hired help?
Ooh.
Because that often happens in tandem is, people get to that $1 million threshold in a year, in a 12-month window, $1 million of sales within a 12-month window of time. I'm not saying they get there in their first year. But when they do get to that point where they're able to sell $1 million in a 12-month window of time, that's when they decide to hire. And it is amazing how naturally and organically the sales will continue to grow when you take that leap of faith. But you may have already hired someone, but I know that has been a very powerful play for you.
Mm-hmm. I think I hired my current virtual. No, I think you're right. Whether or not it was my current virtual assistant or whether I was dabbling with short-term help, I've only ever had admin help. I still do all the quoting and booking. I don't have, what we call independent contractors or sub-agents. So it's still me doing all the sales and bookings, but I have a virtual assistant, and having her take that load off of the people you understand that people outside the industry don't understand the amount of admin work you have to do to satisfy people at the luxury level. You have to enter in commissions. You have to double check the client's questions. You have to see if the hotel will pick them up. You have to see when their final payment is due. You have to double check if they have a nut allergy, all of these things. And you reach a point, as you know, where you can either choose to scale and to do $2 million a year, or you can do $1 million a year and be the person emailing people if they have a nut allergy. And I just don't believe, unless you're booking incredibly expensive trips and you're only booking 5 a month, I think I'm passionate about everyone needs help and that people don't get help soon enough. So I would say I'm probably around $1 million is when I decided to hire help. Whether or not it was the current person, I don't think so. But but I've always been a big proponent of asking for help. I don't always practice what I preach, right? But I'm a big proponent of help. I mean, I had, a postpartum doula at the house to help me. I, paid out of pocket for things like doctor's appointments and physical therapy. And for me, I think that if you have the means, you're fortunate enough to have the means, there's nothing shameful about asking for help. And it makes you a better business owner. It makes you a better person. Again, I don't always follow my own advice, so I need someone sometimes to kind of smack me upside the head and say, ask for help. But
your little child did. I mean, honestly, I think that without getting too stereotypical, I think it's a common weakness of women as a whole is that we're not good at asking for help because, we're strong, independent people. So we want to prove that we're to ourselves, really, is who we're trying to prove it to. But then life throws you not a curveball, but life throws you a situation that will bring you to your knees and be like, okay, I really have to ask for help. And I think having a child is one of those situations where it's like, I, if I was doing this all by myself and I didn't have anybody other responsibilities, I probably wouldn't be asking for help. But, having a baby makes your priorities very, very different. So,
And I think you
you
have
have,
to choose, right? I do think you have to choose. And, for
yeah,
me, I had a very difficult recovery. I suffered a lot. And I think that I had that moment of I woke up one day and couldn't work. I think it's very humbling, but it also taught me a great lesson of the business didn't go anywhere. I've been through this
yeah,
before. I rebuilt after COVID. I gave myself a maternity leave. And I think having that sort of, like you said, coming to your knees and having that face to face of, the business can break and we'll be fine. If I
yeah,
break, no one's fine.
yeah. How did you manage? You said you gave yourself a maternity leave, which I love. I think that is so amazing that you did that.
Mhm.
How did you structure that and
So I,
manage it?
yeah, I had, trying to think if I actually had, I don't remember if I had virtual help at that time or not. I might have had like one-offs, like task based. I didn't have the person I have now. I basically wound down. So I started telling people I wasn't taking any trips past a certain date, past the baby's due date. Um, if I took them during the due date, I was very clear that I was working with partners, with DMCs, that they would need to call that person, that I was going to be out commission. They were fine with that. So I essentially cleared my calendar for 3 to 4 months after the baby was born. And then he was like 2 weeks late. So I was still working anyway, because you're so bored and you're like,
Yeah.
let me just get on the computer. And then I had a very long away message up. I said, I'm on maternity leave. I welcomed my first child. I'm going to be getting back to work soon. I am not going to be responding to your email. Here is a Google form. If you're serious about me planning your trip, please resubmit the form. And I need to know the following. It was very brief, but I needed to
Yeah.
know when they needed an answer. So if you're willing to wait till next month, that's fine. Because, you do find some time in between while baby's napping or whatever. But if you're the type of client that, oh, well, we need something tomorrow, I can't take that on in good faith, because that's not going to happen. So I needed to know when they wanted an answer by, what their budget was, where they're trying to go, if they'd already done research and things like that. And I only responded to people if they filled out that form.
Wow.
Um, and then I did some bookings the first 3 or 4 months, because I leaned on my
Yeah.
partners a lot. They were great bookings, and they're with clients that trusted me and were kind of willing to wait a couple weeks. And I would literally cut and paste their emails and send them to some of my favorite partners. And my partners would do all the work for me and literally turn around a proposal. But I wasn't taking on the type of trips where I'd have to research every hotel or make phone calls. It was very much partner driven trips. So, yeah, that's how I structured it. And then at the end, where I kind of said, okay, I think I am going to come back a little bit more, like a couple hours a week, I started going through that list. Anyone that I had reached out and said, I got your request, I'd love to talk to you again in January. And they said, okay. Then I started saying, okay, let's schedule one call a week. Or I was pretty strict about it, because
Well, that is amazing. And it's such a model for so many other soon to be moms who are taking the same journey. It's very, very inspiring, but it takes an enormous amount of chutzpah. And I think as we're talking, that is a part of your brilliance that you may or may not know, but you ooze confidence and competence, both confidence and competence. You really own your value. And that is amazing. It's so rare that people do, at least on this subject. You absolutely own your value. And so because you do, it didn't even occur to you to doubt this process. Because most people, when they don't own their value, they wouldn't do that. They wouldn't put up that boundary. They wouldn't, guide people on how to work with you. They would be like, I've got to, stand on my head and do as many twists as possible, as whatever they want me to do, I've got to do, because I want them to want to work with me, and I want them to see that I'm willing to, be of service to them. So that's a really good nugget, like the power of owning your brilliance, owning your value, gets you to be able to make decisions like that and structure those kind of things for yourself and make your life so much better because of it. So I want to ask you about the transition to luxury, because you said that you weren't always selling luxury, and you've got such a colorful, deep, rich background, of living internationally and being a global citizen all your life. But also, as you say, you've run the gamut of, working in the Peace Corps and living in West Africa was it West Africa? 3 years where you slept on a floor, and that was definitely not luxury travel. So how did you struggle with prices, price points? Did you bring a little bit of a poverty mindset, or start with booking travel from your own pocket?
Oh, absolutely. And I love this conversation because I think it comes up. Like, I don't think that it's a one and done conversation.
Yeah.
Anytime I've gotten nervous about sending a proposal to a client, it's because I'm leveling up. Like, there's always this level of the first time you send someone a $10,000 proposal, you feel weird. Then you send someone a $20,000 proposal, it feels weird. Then you send someone a $40,000 proposal, it gets weird. And so again, that thing with learning to live in discomfort and knowing that you have to push through discomfort to grow is, if I didn't send those proposals, I wouldn't have the positive feedback of what it means to make that sale. So you have to, I'm all for people having feelings. You have to recognize that a feeling is okay, but you also don't have to act on it either. Two things can happen at the same time. And so I definitely think, for a long time, not so much now because it was a long time ago, but for a long time it was I didn't necessarily promote luxury safaris. It felt odd to me. The first time that you see a hotel that's a certain amount of money, it feels odd, but you just have to practice it. It's like a muscle and you have to know it's uncomfortable. It's like going to the gym or the first time you study abroad, or I still get culture shock when I go to new places overseas and people think I shouldn't. Like, it's a psychological response and you have to just be okay with that. I think if you're not brave enough to sit in yourself and be okay with that, I think that's what stops people from growing. And so, no, but I definitely agree that it has been sometimes hard, but I pushed through it. And now I book quite a lot and have been able to achieve a great level of sales without even, really working full time, because we haven't really had childcare, which is a whole other thing. But I think, realizing the value that you bring to clients, and also having that expertise and that education, leaning on your community of advisors. There's a difference between sending a client a $50,000 trip that actually has like a $25,000 profit built into it. That's a lot different. And that's what doesn't always feel good, right? When you're educated about the products, when you know what a high quality private guide in Tanzania costs, when you know what a typical hotel in Rome that's 5-star costs, or when you know like what wilderness lodges in Alaska cost, like when you're educated, I think that is what gives you power and confidence.
Yeah.
So you can very confidently say to your client, this is on par with what everyone else is paying for a 5-star experience. And you have asked me for a 5-star experience. If this is over your budget, we can go down to a 4-star experience. But you told me that you really wanted a 5-star experience. You told me that you wanted this special memory, and this is what I've created for you. And I'd love to hear what you think about it. And then just stop. Don't make excuses for the price, because you as the agent, you have that response. It's your responsibility to vet the price, I feel, because you don't want to just kind of send it and then wait for the client to ask questions. If you as the agent are confident in the price, it's going to come across in your messaging. Right. Yeah. And you're going to help close the sale. But I do think that is agents' responsibilities to And that takes time to build up, right? You have a couple different partners you work with. You start to learn how much trips cost. You ask other people in our wonderful GTN network. None of this can be learned overnight. And I think sometimes people put a lot of pressure on themselves. So they have to know everything right away. But lean on the community. But no, it is hard. I still get nervous sometimes with some trips. But you have to push through it. If you're confident in the value, you just have to see what happens.
Can you think about like what is like your biggest transaction size or your biggest trip? Is it in the six figures?
If you totaled everything, yes. I have had it wasn't one package, like here's six figures, but when I was doing the insurance and counting up everything, like the hotels, the tours, the flights, everything, and wondering why the insurance is so expensive. And then I realized that it was a six-figure trip. And they were wonderful to work with. So
that often is the case. It's amazing how sometimes the easiest clients are the ones that are spending the most. So I think what you are demonstrating or illustrating here is a theory that I've had for years and years and years, that if you want to attract luxury clients, you want to up level the kind of clients that you work with, you have to up level your mindset first, because you attract what you are. And, when you're doubting yourself, you're going to attract people who are doubting you. So, and people get really frustrated with that answer, because the question is always like, how do I attract luxury clients? How did you go from having clients who had, shoestring budget to being willing to spend, want a 5-star experience? Because that's not the same person, most likely. And I think what you illustrated is the answer that I give. It's like, it's not necessarily linear, it has to start with your mindset. But that doesn't mean you don't take action on doing marketing things to attract those clients. It just means that the ideas and the inspiration to pick up the phone and call someone, or have somebody call you because somebody referred you without you even knowing it, and an email just lands in your inbox, because you've done the mindset shift. Would you agree with that? If someone were to ask you, how did you actually transition from the mainstream clients, the ones looking to spend $3,000 on a trip versus $30,000 on a trip?
I lived and breathed the type of trips that I wanted to plan. So I don't have a lot of time for it now, but pre-baby, I have a very good blog that attracts a lot of, clients just based on SEO. And I blog about the luxury train trips. I blog about Portugal. I blog about Alaska. I blog about the things. Every time I went to a conference and would get introduced to a new cruise line, I would blog about it. And so it's all out there. And I send it to clients like, hey, I'm proposing Azamara for you. Here's my blog about them. Right. And so if you're sitting around, here's the thing. It has to be more than just sales. It's okay if you focus on the type of trips that organically produce those sales, right? So luxury cruises, the private drivers in Tuscany, like that's fine. I know that we're still talking about 6-figure trips, but if you only focus on, I want to sell 6-figure trips, you're missing something, because you are not telling the universe or your vibe or whatever you want to call it. You're not actually saying what type of client you want to attract. And that's when you get people who view you as a transaction, because you've only put out there that you want to book $100,000 trip, and that's it. And so you're going to get people that are viewing you as, I want this trip. You're going to book it the way I do. I'm going to call you 24/7. You're going to feel disempowered. And so, we know when it's not a right fit, right? But I think when you change the mindset to, like river cruises, I educated myself on river cruises for years before I finally sold them. Same with Rocky Mountaineer. I sell so much of Rocky Mountaineer, and I write so much about them. And, I got to go on a fan with them because I booked them so much. And that was an amazing opportunity and just a very wow moment. But I feel like I was prepping for that for several years, but it wasn't fake. I fell in love with this product. I wrote articles on how to pick which train route to do, what hotel should you stay in, how to customize the trip, why you should work with a travel agent who's passionate about it. And, those aren't cheap trips. And so now people come to me to design those trips, and then the income comes after that. So I just think getting really clear on if you're not excited about the trips that you're planning, why should your clients be excited, and why should they be expected to spend money on them? That for me is
Oh my gosh. That is such gold right there. That is such gold. It's such a shift. And it's something that I teach when I teach in our travel MBA program, our travel MBA students about cultivating a compelling message, magnetic message. The way that you transition from a message that feels very transactional and pushy to a message that is magnetic, i.e., it pulls in your ideal prospect like a magnet, is by a very powerful shift, which you just described right there. And that shift is you have to not come from a get place. Like, I'm trying to get a 6-figure booking. I really want to get a 6-figure booking. You have to shift from wanting to get something to wanting to give something. And for you just leaned into what you loved, what luxury travel experiences you were very passionate about. And honestly, I think about your Rocky Mountaineer. That was so smart, but it was probably just because you loved it. But there aren't that many people blogging about it.
No, I mean, I book, 10 to, now I'm going to jinx myself, but I probably book about maybe 10 to 12 a year. And I haven't run any Facebook ads since 2020. I used to have a lot of ads, when we were all recovering, but I haven't run anything since I got pregnant. And it's all from people Googling because they're overwhelmed with information. And I'm one of the few agents that blogs about it. Same with, my Portugal downloads and stuff. And I'm not necessarily saying that that's like the marketing technique, but I do think that there is a synergy between what you love, in the mentorship program. Sometimes I love talking to agents and helping them out. And I learn so much for them. And I'm always writing down the things they tell me, right? But, there are people that, have told me, I love planning this type of trip, but I feel like I should do X. And I'm sort of like, but why? Because your passion comes out when you talk about this. That's how you're going to make the sales. And you think, I've done that too. And there's destinations that I struggle with, I'm not as passionate about. And I'm really trying to put that into practice this year. Even if it's a high sale, I'm really trying to take stock of the fact that I have so few hours in the day to work. Do I want to spend it on something that doesn't bring me joy, that feels like a struggle? And when something feels like we know the difference between leveling up and feeling uncomfortable versus this is a struggle. My whole body is screaming at me that I don't like doing this. There is a huge difference in just being uncomfortable because it's a new price point or a new product versus there's something about this client I don't like, or there's something about this trip, or I've pulled back. I've called clients and said, listen, I want to make this trip the best possible. There's something off with this proposal. I'd like to give you a few more days. Give me a few more days. I want to get a different partner involved because there's just something that I want to make this better for you. And don't be afraid to start over and have those conversations because it's not going to get better if it's already too bad.
Yeah, that's a great strategy for sales. I love that. I want to go back to, you said you don't necessarily even work full time because you don't have daycare for your little one. So how do you structure that, and how do you juggle all that? Because I know that there are moms that are like, do I put my child in daycare? Do I try and do it all?
Yeah. First of all, there's no perfect answer for every family.
No.
right?
Totally
There's
agree.
no right answer. As you know, parenthood is full of decisions. And, I always kind of say that's why I sort of am very confident and competent in my business, because I have so many like doubts and anxieties as a parent that I can't take doubts and anxiety in anything else. So I've decided that my business is where I know exactly what I want to do, and I'll save like the anxiety for parenthood, right? Like that's how I've compartmentalized it. So it has definitely been a journey. We've gone through different um combinations that's changed. In the summer we had more help. This past summer we had an amazing babysitter. She came about 3 times a week for the morning and then put him down for a nap and then leave. So I'd get the morning and nap time. And so, you can do quite a lot once you're focused. I can't do what I did with my time before a kid. But when I know I only have 5 hours of focus work, you better believe that I'm like, no, my assistant needs to be emailing, asking how much the airport transfers are. That is not something that I need to spend my 4 hours of focus work on. You get very, and then she got a job and she still my babysitter can come only in the afternoons now after 4, which is my husband or my partner also works for himself. And so that has been both a blessing and a curse because he never stopped working. But we have been, I don't know what I would have done with my situation if I hadn't been able to have him home with me when I had a little one. I don't think I would have survived. And so that has been an incredible.
He's amazing. Your husband, your partner, very involved, just as, and yes.
Yeah.
That's amazing that you got that support.
Right. And that's amazing for my son, right? That he is going to have a strong father figure in his life. So I love that. And so we always even though it's hard, I struggle the same as everyone else with self-doubt and the sales and time management and things like that. I always try to bring it back to what am I trying to create for my family? And so having the ability to go to the zoo together as a family or go out to eat as a family or maybe take a trip together, I've decided that that's more important to me than to have a very traditional, like 40 hours a week daycare, spend the money on that just so I can work. Because I want to create a life that I love. So right now, there are a couple other things that have opened up for childcare. So I'm thinking for the rest of the spring, I'm hopeful that I'll have childcare 3 or 4 times a week, at least, in the mornings. So I don't want to say I don't have any, like we're working on it. And we've definitely had ups and downs. The winter was very hard because it was only once or twice a week in the evenings. And so, my partner and I have to structure it. We have a shared calendar. Whoever puts a phone call on there, they get in, right? So if you don't look at the calendar, you're screwed. Basically, we had a lot of discussions about you have to look at the calendar before you commit to this. But we're both trained. And I think that's also a self-discipline thing. And that's something I've had to work on. I think to your point, I don't know if it's necessary. Obviously, it's not all women, but I struggle a lot with, I don't even know if you call it guilt. It's a lot harder for me to get up and say, I'm just going to do focus work now versus if I have a call that's very easy to put on the calendar, right? But if we're both sitting around the living room watching, my toddler climb the walls and, create some type of like nuclear weapon or something, we are in destruction phase here, right? It's very hard for me to get up and say, you need to be in charge now. I'm going to do focus work. And that's something that I have to take responsibility for. I think, I've really come to a realization that I've been kind of sitting around waiting for him to tell me it's okay, you can go work. And I don't think that's a fair expectation either, but he's very good at saying, you guys look fine. I'm going to go into the office and do work for 2 hours. Right. But that leads to resentment, right? Because as parents and as spouses, you feel like someone's taking advantage, but they're really not. They're just much more disciplined at speaking their needs. And so I really, it's not magical over here. It's definitely been ups and downs. There's definitely been a lot of tears, especially now during wave season without having a regular babysitter. And we've all been sick. And, it's been pretty hard because the only times to work are nap time or if you kind of claim, that shared calendar, nighttime. And frankly, in the evenings, I'm exhausted. So it is challenging. I think that everyone has to, I definitely do not want to give the impression that you can be, a $2 million agent and just have your toddler sit quietly with Legos. Like that is not, no, 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 no. That is not the reality. He's not even at the age where he wants to slam the computer down. He's not playing like an angel while I sip my coffee and design trips, right?
Yeah.
It's not Instagram. So I think just being really clear on what type of support you need. We don't have family nearby. My sisters are amazing, but they don't live nearby. So when they're able to fly in, they are so amazing. I'm so glad that they're in my son's life, but they're not you can't call them up and say, I need a break. And so it is just us. And that has been very difficult. And I think it's worth saying out loud and acknowledging. And for people with small children, they have to make these decisions every day. And I think that's up to every family. Do you put them in daycare full time so you can make a living? With me and my transaction sizes and my clients and my referrals, I'm able to do it this way for now. And then starting the fall, he'll be in like a little school program 2 or 3 times a week, because he'll be almost 3. So he'll be able to do stuff a little bit more formal.
And that's the other thing is like this too will pass, right?
Right.
So this period of his life is temporary. And there will be a point, which is not that far in the future, if he's almost 3, that he'll be going to school all day. So I love how you're just figuring it out. But I think you illustrate, don't let having a child hold you back. You can still do this. Right. You can figure it out and, figure out what works for you and your family and your priorities. And for some people, like you said, it might be putting that child into full-time daycare. For me, what worked was I ultimately hired an au pair, which is, at the time that I started doing that, an au pair was about half the cost of a full-time nanny. But you got them full-time. You just had to have a room in your house, an extra room in your house where they could stay. And we had even more than that. We had a room with a bathroom. They don't have to have their own private bathroom. But we had that, and we had an extra car, which was very enticing. So I felt like we had a great offer. And so I was really good at, I feel like, picking really good candidates. And that was a fantastic experience for everybody because it was like having another family member in the home. Ultimately, if you pick the right person, and they would come for a year and they had the option to extend for a second year. So we had quite a few that we had for 2 whole years, and then a couple that we had for a year. And we did that for about 10 years. And it really got us through the hardest, most busy parenting stages. Whatever works for you, you can figure out. Now we're way over time. So you are a mentor. I want to end with this question. And as a mentor, what do you think, based upon what people come to you and ask for guidance on, what do you think are some secrets to your success or advice that you have for someone who is not there yet, not at $1 million in sales, but wants to be?
I think that based on the conversations I've had with people, I think that if you can get into a mindset where you view things as daily challenges and daily victories and understand that, I know I say this a lot, but I'm such a huge proponent of so many of the things that people tell me I'm good at are muscles that need to be exercised. Having an abundance mentality is something that I work at every single day, learning not to compare my journey, in parenthood and entrepreneurship with other people. Like I work at that every single day. I'm not like sitting around saying everything's great, right? But
Mhm.
even when I backslide, I still try to practice that. Okay, I had my moment, I had my meltdown, feelings are okay. Now we're going to get up and we're going to try to make that sale again. And I think that when I talk sometimes to people, they think it's a one and done, right? I did this proposal, I tried this, it didn't work. That means it's never going to work. And that's just not how, like, that's not how it works in sports. That's not how it works in the Olympics. That's not how it works in life. And so
Yeah.
understanding that you're viewing yourself as your journey is more of like a centipede, maybe? I hate using that, but it's like this little inching forward, right? It looks like you're going backwards, but you're still, when you
Yeah.
look down 5 minutes later, that snail will still have moved. But if you
Yeah.
only look at it as I didn't reach $1 million this year, I've talked to so many people that'll say that, and I'll have to remind them. But on our last call, you told me that you made the most sales that you ever did this year, or you turned down a client that was abusive. Like, I'm so proud of you for exercising that muscle of sticking to your boundaries and learning to be like confidence is learned. Like I was a very, very shy person growing up. I'm still an introvert. I don't like large groups. Um, but in business, like the confidence I have comes from knowing that people want to hear what I have to say. But the only way you're going to learn that is if you practice it and make your I'm such a big proponent of making yourself uncomfortable. Every couple of years I try to learn a new skill that it's so embarrassing because I'm the worst at it, but you have to learn how to sit in
Yeah.
that comfort because otherwise
Oh my gosh.
you're
Yes.
just not going to move forward. And travel industry knocks you down a lot. It's
Oh
very
yeah.
high and very low, right? One minute you're on a list, the next
Yep.
minute you're thinking everyone in the forum is posting these big victories, and there's
Yep.
there's a lot of like jealous little angels on your shoulder and things like that, and we all fight against that. So I think I love talking to other agents, and I learn so much from them, and it's really important to me to give back. Impact is a really big part of why I think we're put on this earth. And I just think that if you can remind yourself that the first time you go to the gym, you don't lift, I don't even know the terms, but you don't bench
Yeah.
press 100
Yeah.
pounds first time at the gym. And you
Yeah.
need a coach, you need a teacher that's going to break it down and say, listen, we're not learning that today. Today, we're just going to learn how to hinge your hips because you're terrible at that. And until you get that foundation right, you're actually never going to do that squat. And
Yeah.
I think that's what people don't
Yeah.
know, that it's okay to break down the individual things and then build yourself back up so you're complete as a whole.
Yeah. Very, very good advice. Very powerful. Um, I could sit and listen to you talk all day. I really could. So if anybody wants to get a hold of you because they're so fascinated by what you are passionate about doing when it comes to planning travel, how do they get a hold of you?
I have a website, travelobservations.com. Email is always best, Anna@travelobservations.com. And I am on social media, although I am woefully behind, but also at Travel Observations on Instagram and Facebook. But email is always the best way to get a hold of me.
Always the best way. Yeah. The best place to triage things, as we
Yes.
say. Well, thank you so much, Anna. This has been amazing. I could go for another hour easily. I still have questions that I didn't get to ask, but maybe we will do a part 2 sometime in the future.
That was so nice to get to talk to you. I learned so much from you, and you've given me such great advice over the years, and such great nuggets. And it's great to see things that you've mentioned. Even when I go back and watch some of your old videos, even if it wasn't advice to me, to kind of see how that sort of simmered and came to fruition a couple years later. I love the opportunities to kind of get your perspective on things. So this was really fun.
This was very fun. All right. Well, thank you so much. Goodbye, everyone, for now, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks for listening to the Travel Business Unpacked podcast, where we dive deep into the exciting world of travel entrepreneurship. If you're looking for more, we have some great resources for both aspiring travel entrepreneurs and existing travel advisors. Aspiring travel entrepreneurs, if you're thinking about turning your love for travel into a profitable business and enviable life, take our Travel Entrepreneurial Suitability Score quiz. It's fun and insightful. Just go to travelmba.giftedtravelnetwork.com. Find out if you're ready to professionalize your passion for travel. Current travel advisors. If you've been selling travel but haven't been able to grow your sales beyond $200,000 in a 12-month window of time, our quiz can help there too. Again, you can find that at travelmba.giftedtravelnetwork.com. Advisors looking for a change. If you're seeking an elevated hosting experience for the luxury travel advisor, check us out at giftedtravelnetwork.com. We'd love to chat with you. And with that, we wrap up today's journey. We hope we inspired you today, or at a minimum, put a smile on your face.